gentlemen, this is Paused Reviews, the podcast where Tim and I watch all the stuff. We watch all the stuff. So you don't have to. We find what's good, what's bad, and try to help you find something great to watch tonight.
And sometimes we just torture each other.
Yeah. Yeah, Tim. Yeah. You know, we're just going to jump in this? Is that what we're going to do?
I mean, we can.
Because I've got some words for you, my friend. You know,
I know.
I make you watch a lot of things.
Yeah.
I take pride, though, in saying, like I'll watch something and I'll say, you know, I know Tim's not a superhero guy. Or I know Tim's not X, Y, or Z. But this is an element that exists in this movie that I think he could get behind. Mm-hmm. I wonder if I could expose him to something new, you know, expand his palette a little bit, as it were.
Yeah.
You know? But in the end, he'll still like it.
Yeah. So
I thought, in that vein of, you know, mutual respect, friendship, professionalism, that you recommended a movie to me.
Yep.
And I you know what? I backtrack. Recommend is a strong word, right? You requested I watch something.
Yeah, let's be fair. I mean, I think I'm just returning the favor from when you made me watch Don Juan DeMarco.
That's...
I just waited a year to return that favor.
Wait. First of all, that was a listener request. Second of all, and we accept all listener requests without... Well, that's not true. There was one I refused to watch.
I distinctly remember you telling me how much you loved this movie, though.
But I also said it wasn't good. So
Did I not do the same thing?
You really did. And part of what makes it so funny, I completely forgot about Don Juan DeMarco again. And I think I said in that episode, this is a movie you will watch and forget you. Like, I've completely forgotten that we watched that movie. It is gone from my synapses.
I did not, because I believe on your Vudu account, it's in the wish list. And every time I'm scrolling through Vudu, there it is in the wish list.
Okay, wait. To be fair, it's in there because that's Vudu's like shopping cart.
Yeah.
Right? So I was like, if I have to... I think I put it there to remember to rent it or whatever we did. And look, listen, you're not wrong. and I'm glad you reminded me, because I feel like now I owe you an apology. And I had every intention to light you up tonight. And I feel legless. I feel completely disarmed, alone. And so sorry that I forgot about that. I would say yes, we're even, Tim. We're even. Yep. All right, so to kind of let everyone else in on what the hell we're talking about.
Yep.
Tim, you wanted me to watch a movie. What did you ask me to watch?
So it's been bubbling in the back of my brain, and I think I mentioned it a while ago. And I know historically that this is a bad movie, and everybody feels this way. But it popped in my brain again recently because the hip hop artist known as Shock G, otherwise Humpty Hump, recently passed away. Mm-hmm. And that reminded me of this movie that I watch every once in a while, every couple of years, a movie from 1991 called Nothing But Trouble. And it is a stellar cast for early 90s. Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, John Candy, Demi Moore. It literally is stacked. I mean, this movie is stacked.
Yes, everyone that you would have wanted to see in a late 80s, early 90s comedy.
Yep.
With the exception of Demi Moore.
Yeah. Correct. Because she's just not funny. And it's a movie that, like, my mom taped off TV when I was a kid. I love Dan Aykroyd, obviously. I love John Candy. I love Chevy Chase. So why wouldn't I like this movie? I don't know if my mom had seen it previously or what, but it's one of those ones where she taped it off TV. I'm probably missing the first 15 minutes of this movie for most of my life until I, started watching it on streaming services or until I found it on YouTube. But this movie is universally reviled, like completely reviled. But I love this movie. It is weird. It is creepy. And I told you that you will understand parts of my being and why my aesthetic and my interests are in more macabre, weird things, because this movie is macabre and weird.
Yes, so this week, Tim requested we watch Nothing But Trouble from 1991. In watching that, we just sort of jumped off on all kinds of conversations, which we've often had about, things that you watch as a child. Is it good now? Is it not? Don Juan, a prime example. So that led me to request that we watch This Is 40. And we'll get into the why behind that as we explore these things. And then lastly this week, we're going to talk about the brand new, fresh off the presses. That's not a thing. They're not presses. That's not what you say about movies. But we're going to talk about the new release of Lin Manuel Miranda's In the Heights, which came to HBO Max and theaters this past week. A week ago when this airs. It'll be like Friday. Yeah. So last Friday, In the Heights dropped in theaters and same day on HBO Max. It's available on HBO Max until July 4th, I think. So we're going to be talking about that at length, I think. We have some pretty strong feelings and lots of questions, stuff we loved, stuff that we maybe didn't care so much for or just felt a way about. So I think we're going to dedicate the largest chunk of this episode to that. And that's going to be this week's Rewind. So all that being said, we've kind of already started with some of the chatter about Nothing But Trouble. Nothing But Trouble, like Tim said, from 1991, Dan Aykroyd, written and directed by Dan Aykroyd, but Dan Aykroyd's in it, Chevy Chase, John Candy, Demi Moore, Taylor Negron is in it, people that you totally recognize from this period of film. And
Tupac!
God, we'll get to that. I was so surprised in that scene when he just starts, attempting to sing. And I was like, what is happening right now?
I love that song. I absolutely love that song.
Oh, my God. I thought it was awful. So from 1991. Unfortunately, it's not available anywhere for free. Unless maybe you can find it on like YouTube or something. But we did rent it for $3.99.
Yeah. It had been on Vudu for a long time.
Yeah.
But don't spend money on this.
I mean, honestly, do not. Seriously, don't. It has a 13% Rotten Tomatoes score, but as if to vindicate you, Tim, 47% audience score.
Yeah, I think there was it 5 out of 10 on IMDb? Is that what I saw?
Yeah, like 5.1, something like that.
And This Is 40 is like 6 point something out of 10. So
I would classify that as a cult classic. It has its niche, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who either saw it when they were young or didn't, and consider it so bad it's good. Could I? I know I do most of the talking.
Yeah,
but I feel like can I give my impression and then maybe ask you some questions?
Absolutely.
All right,
fire away.
So I will say the first 2 to 3 minutes of this movie, I think I gathered that your intention was for me to watch this and feel strongly negatively about it.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And the first couple of minutes, I was like, I think I'm going to disappoint Tim because the opening moments were kind of hitting what I wanted it to be, right? Chevy Chase being his most Chevy Chase. Alyssa started watching it with me, and even she was kind of laughing. There's a scene when it opens where Chevy Chase, he arrives at his apartment, and then he gets off of the elevator. He sees Demi Moore. He makes it so they end up in the elevator together. Things happen. She has to rush off, and he's left holding all of her stuff, which includes an espresso maker and a bag of dog crap. And and he's just looking at it. And he just looks down and, very matter of fact, is like, "All right, thanks for the espresso maker and the bag of shit." Mm-hmm. and it's classic delivery. It's great. That's the best part of the movie.
Yep.
From there, it spirals into a weird, like, twisted. If you could say like a twisted Chainsaw Massacre, that's what this is. It's more twisted than that.
It's Chainsaw meets House of a Thousand Corpses meets Hills Have Eyes
meets Rocky Horror Picture Show, maybe. Like, it is so weird. The general idea is Chevy Chase and Demi Moore and two of their friends end up on a road trip to Atlantic City. They go through this real small bumpkin town in Pennsylvania called, what is it? Falconvania?
Falconvania. Actually, I think it's just southern Jersey, because there's no reason they'd end up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's true.
But that confused the shit out of me when I was a kid, because Falconvania, Pennsylvania, there's a place in Pennsylvania that I keep saying Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania.
You said it now so much it's weird.
There's a place where there are coal fires, a town that, like, there's burning coal fires underneath of it, and the town is closed. So in my brain, Centralia, Pennsylvania. So I just always assumed that this had more of a Pennsylvania look than a South Jersey Pine Barrens look, but I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff in South Jersey, so.
In the slower lower.
Yeah.
So, so they end up, they run a stoplight, and then John Candy's the cop. Dan Aykroyd is like the magistrate judge or whatever in this town.
Yep. And
they end up getting arrested and taken to Dan Aykroyd's house, which is like a house of 1,000 horrors. and they're basically kept there on all kinds of absurd and ridiculous pretenses.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out a very rough patch thrown together backstory of this real, remote family. Yep. They're all related. Like I said, very Chainsaw. And so Demi Moore and Chevy Chase and all of them have to find a way to escape the clutches of this really twisted family. Where do I go from here? I don't think we need to delve too much or too far into the what. But I have questions for you about the why. I will say this. So in watching it, so question number one, how old were you when you first saw this?
I had to, let's see, it came out in 91. We were living in Delaware. We moved to Delaware in the summer of 91. So I'd say I couldn't have been older than 10.
Okay. I was in 91. I was 7. Yeah.
So it was definitely at a time when it would have been on TV, because again, my mom taped it off of TV. So
yeah,
I had to have been 10 at least. At an age where I'm like, this was probably somewhat inappropriate for me to be watching.
Right, but not like absurdly inappropriate.
Yeah.
So I asked that because knowing who I know as Tim today, I can absolutely see the injection of this film during formative years of your mental space and how this triggered. Your love of Nightmare Before Christmas and all kinds of stuff. Plus, you're already very young at heart as it is. You've got the love of the macabre, but you're also a big Disney guy. Yeah, we've covered many shows and movies on this podcast that you've watched it at almost inappropriate old ages.
Well, that's mainly my wife, but yes.
Okay, Tim. But I will say this is so in your canon that it's crazy. I could see why you loved it as a kid.
Yep.
I think most kids would have been traumatized to the point where there were scenes I was eating lunch, finishing up this movie, and I had to stop because it's in times it is grotesque enough
Yep.
that I was like, oh, I can't eat and watch this. And I couldn't imagine being a kid and watching it and being like, oh, I like this. I would have had nightmares about it.
I mean, it add in this and Ghostbusters and Stripes and The Great Outdoors to some degree. These movies were in heavy rotation for me at a young age.
Oh, but this doesn't sit on the level of those.
But I'm not. But the actors, right?
Yes.
At that age, you're like, oh, I like them, right? I'm not thinking about Home Alone, John Candy, like that. Those movies, that's just stuff. Groundhog's Day. Yes, some of these are better, and as an adult, you're like, oh, I know which ones are good. But these people are in it. I'm going to like it. And it was weird and it was goofy. But then one of the things that I did a lot of growing up was going to antique shopping and antique malls and weird side of the road houses that sold, antiques. So the whole aesthetic of this film is not lost on me and is sort of a comfortably weird thing.
So you know what it reminded me of, and I would say this: if as a kid you watched stuff like this, if you were into this type of thing, honestly, if you were into this type of thing, you've probably seen this movie. But it reminded me, I had friends, when I got older, who grew up watching shows like Garbage Pail Kids or saw the movie The Garbage Pail Kids and found that hysterical. I can see a love of Tom Green in this. If you as a teenager really were into Tom Green and his brand of comedy, if you liked, and if you like horror and gore and that kind of stuff, I'm not saying that's what this is, but this is kind of an amalgam of sort of all of that, grotesque for the sake of comedy, weird for the sake of weird.
Yeah.
Twisted for the sake of writing goes out the window.
Oh, yeah.
This movie is awful. It makes no sense. You end up places and you have no idea how you got there. My biggest questions were just so it's story by Peter Aykroyd and screenplay by Dan Aykroyd. He directed it. I just see them in a drunken haze, just having hilarious conversations with each other on a long weekend. And then, he had put in his dues and said, screw it. Let's make that movie that we're always talking about just for the heck of it. I can't imagine he made this with the intention of it ever being seen as anything positive. It just feels like he had to get it off his brain.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because that actually did have a little bit of bearing on it. And even being a variation on Rocky Horror, because that's what a lot of critics said. But the idea kind of came around because Dan Aykroyd went to see Hellraiser with a friend in 1987, and they wanted to go see a horror movie, and this kind of weird Hellraiser-esque situation mixed in with a little bit of Beetlejuice, I guess. There's just all these things factor, all these things sort of factor into it, right? There's influences are there. And I think you're right. I think if we went down a rabbit hole and spent a lot of time looking, I think we'd probably find, reasons why this movie ended up getting made. But it's just so weird. And you're absolutely right. Nothing really happens in the end.
It's so bad. Okay, so look, it's bad. It's awful. If anything we've said sounds like you, oh, I love this, but you got to be careful. I like Beetlejuice. Hate this movie. It can't be. Yes, I like that one thing.
Yep.
You have to really appreciate weird stuff and weird humor and just whatever. It's to even as an adult have any appreciation, I think, for this movie. This is definitely firmly one. If you saw it as a kid, I could see what you liked about it. And that it's a guilty pleasure cult thing for you now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, if you've never seen this before, unless you check a lot of very specific boxes,
Yep.
you ain't the demo anymore.
If you, and I will say, if you want to do a, terrible movie night, like if you do that, something you do with your group of friends.
No.
Do it.
No, don't do this. Watch like The Lake House. Don't watch this. Like if I had the choice between watching this movie one more time and then watching anything else for the rest of my life,
Candy and drag.
Like I could only watch like Battlefield Earth for the rest of my life. I would watch Battlefield Earth for the rest of my life to not watch this movie again.
I am watching this forever and ever and ever.
And I can appreciate that.
So this is what's stirring this conversation, right? Because it sort of, we talked about this with This Is 40. Because I absolutely agree with you that had I seen this movie today, given what we've been doing for the last year and a half, it's, you'd be like, oh, what the heck? These guys are pedigree. What is this garbage, right?
So confusing.
And you just, it's just lost on you. I saw Goonies at a very older age. I saw Goonies in 2014 for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And Carissa bought it for me as a birthday present because she's like, you have to see this movie. And I'm like, okay, I mean, fine. I can see that if I saw it when I was 10, that movie would be gold to me. And I can appreciate that people love it. But seeing it at age 30, 29 doesn't hold a candle to what that experience would have been.
That's true. And I think that's so interesting because I also would have pegged you. If I had heard you never saw The Goonies, I would have been like, oh, you'll like this movie.
Yeah.
Just because you have such a firm background in stuff like that. I would have thought as an adult you could have like disconnected and gone to your inner child and found a love for it. But it also doesn't surprise me at all that you couldn't. I agree with you completely. Absolutely. I think Goonies is totally overrated, but it's not made for adults. It's really not.
There are things that fill that void. Like I'll watch, I don't know, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark or something like that, right?
Yes.
And that fills for me what Goonies is. And I'm sure there's other ones that I could think of that are a little bit more in line. But to that end, this conversation sort of flips with This Is 40, right?
Yeah.
A movie that maybe you saw too young.
Yes. So what a great transition. This Is 40. On a whim, I decided to give this one another shot. And you know what stood out to me was the title. And I think actually what had happened was I was in a YouTube black hole of gag reels and blooper reels and whatever. And I had seen some Anchorman ones, whatever. And so following the Paul Rudd thread, I had found myself watching bloopers from This Is 40. And I was like, I don't remember any of this. And the bloopers were funny and it was what it was. So I said, maybe I need to revisit this movie. Yeah. So I threw it on for just, S's and G's over the weekend.
Yep.
And I couldn't stop laughing. And I remember watching this movie when it came out. It was billed as this sequel to Knocked Up. It came out in 2012. Paul Rudd and Leslie Mann reprising their same roles from Knocked Up.
Yep.
And, I loved that movie. I really enjoyed Knocked Up. A lot of people did. I think when this movie came out, people went in there expecting a solid, albeit loose sequel. It was always billed as the loose sequel to Knocked Up. It was never supposed to be like a true sequel. But you can't separate that, especially when one has the success that it had. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the tagline on the movie poster was even the sort of sequel to Knocked Up.
Right. And so I think a lot of things were working against this movie in 2012, and I fell into that trap. When I saw this, I didn't think it was funny. I don't remember laughing. I remember hating it, right? And it has like a 50-something score on Rotten Tomatoes, which is mirrored on both sides. I think it's like 51% critics and like 54% audience. It's not great. So I threw it on, and I was shocked as to why I was laughing so much. And it made me think. We have talked so many times about movies that we saw when we were young and loved them, and then you continue that love when you get older, even if it's a bad movie. This was a movie I was realizing that I was too young when I saw it. I expected something different than what they were promising, right? And it just didn't click. I mean, clue number one, don't go see a movie called This Is 40 if you're 20-something.
Yeah.
But as now 37, married, 2 kids, I couldn't stop laughing. So I wanted to talk about it this week because odds are you've seen this, right? Mm-hmm. If you're our age, you enjoyed Knocked Up, you liked 40-Year-Old Virgin, and you went and saw This Is 40, and you were grossly disappointed. And I would urge you that if you are our age, if you've seen it before, if you have not seen it since, you are now married, you've got kids, and you have lived a life, right, where you have stared into the butthole of your partner for medical reasons, right? Watch this movie again. Give it a second chance, because I think in this second leg of our lives, this movie hits totally different. I loved it. I would have given Nothing But Trouble 1 star. I give This Is 40. I would like a 7.5 out of 10.
So I think the audience that you're looking for is actually where I fall, because you mentioned this, and I said I had never seen it. It was on that list of like,
you had never seen it.
I had never seen it.
Oh,
so I was like, oh yeah, it was on my radar for all of the reasons that you just said it. Like, oh, I recently, like last summer, rewatched Knocked Up, mainly because I was just running through stuff. But I was like, we're gonna have a baby. Like, this seems like the appropriate, as you do.
Yeah,
like, Father of the Bride Part 2, Knocked Up, 9 months. Like, I went through all the baby movies, and I was like, all right.
Same way you go through all the baby making ones when you're ready to start that.
Exactly.
9.5 weeks. Pornhub.
And so I coming into this a little fresh, sort of emulated, was 2007 to 2012, July of last year to June of this year, whatever the equivalent. Mm-hmm. And I see exactly how people could have been disappointed. There's some through line for some characters. Like they bring a couple other characters from Knocked Up. One fairly obscure, and then Jason Segel, who was a supporting cast, but he had a memorable personality in Knocked Up.
Right.
And those are the only 2 people that they bring through to this movie. And they don't explain why. They're vaguely the same person. They have the same name. It's been years, right, in this universe. And so I did sit there for a few minutes and like, well, what happened? Why did they keep in touch with these people? What happened to everybody else? Where's, Allison and, what's her name? Katherine Heigl's character and Seth Rogen. Where are they? They used to live in the pool house out back.
Right.
And there's no mention of them. And so I could see how that could distract people. Add to the fact that this is not a blue comedy, right? This isn't a stoner movie, really. This is, there's parts, but it's not the stoner movie, the blue comedy that Knocked Up was.
Right.
And that would be utterly distracting. Except for the fact that I'm going to be 36.
Get there, buddy.
I'm going to be 36. I just had a kid. And I've been married since 2016. We've been living together since 2014. This is very relatable stuff happening here.
Right?
Like, extremely relatable. You talked about the peeking up the ass with the flashlight, the going to the bathroom and playing a game on your phone for slightly too long
just
than your
to get
spouse
away.
Likes. Yeah. And, they're like, where you been? Pooping. Really? You just pooping? Like, yeah, had to finish this level, right? Like, that stuff. And then the relationships with the family, like, oh, why are you giving your dad money? Like, why are you doing this for well, you don't understand why I do this for this sibling or this parent. And, you have your own messed up relationship with your family and your dad. The relationship between the kids has changed, right? They were cute little kids in Knocked Up. And now, Sadie is, is in high school, and her little sister feels abandoned by her because they're not friends anymore, because they're at different, they're at that weird age gap now, right?
It's so sweet too. There's that scene, right, where it's almost like do you want to build a snowman?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
you just, there's sweetness, there's levity, but it's funny because it's true.
Yeah.
It's not funny because it's crass or ridiculous or whatever. It's funny because it's true.
Yeah.
But that's only funny now. And that's why I feel like this movie, the billing was wrong. It was just, it wasn't the right time when you saw it. Now might be the right time.
If you could disassociate the idea that these characters had a previous story, right?
Yes.
Or think of it in terms of like, this is these characters' story. Knocked Up was another character story told from that character's point of view. And so this is a story in that same universe told from these characters' point of view. And all those other characters from Knocked Up don't factor into this story. And if they do, they only factor into it from what these characters know of them.
That's a great fact, right? Jason Segel, for example, we saw him in Knocked Up through Seth's eyes.
Yep.
And now you're seeing it through Paul Rudd and Leslie Mann's eyes.
Yep.
And that's perhaps a different person. He plays differently.
Yep.
But yet somehow still the same. I think, too, we've seen enough anthologies in recent years, like The Haunting of Hill Houses and the American Horror Stories and all this kind of stuff, where you see the same actors playing different roles and different parts, that I think maybe now people are more ready and able to disassociate characters with a movie that they liked before.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's just, I would really encourage people to go to HBO Max and check out This Is 40, because I think it earns a second watch later in life. And if you're anything like us, you'll find it funny. Did you enjoy it for a first-time watch?
I did. I was very, very, like, I want to actually watch it again and have Carissa watch it, because I
want to have Alyssa watch it.
I think it hits all these notes. And I was really impressed that it didn't touch the low-hanging fruit and go for a cheating story or anything like that. It's a very... It's more relatable that way, rather than just saying like, oh, we're going to have them cheat on each other. And it's not even just about their relationship. It's about all of their relationships in at this stage in their lives that are dysfunctional. And to have it go that route would have felt too cliche and also too cheap at the same time. And it just as a package really works and is really, I want to say wholesome in some sort of way, but I don't know if that's the right way of saying it.
Well, I think it keeps it relatable throughout, right? Like, if there's a moment where one of them starts cheating because things got tough, that's not the narrative, I don't think, for most marriages, right?
Yeah.
Sure, half end in divorce, whatever it may be, for various reasons. I'm just not convinced that the narrative for most marriages is infidelity. And I think what this movie allows to happen is that marriage can create conflict enough that we don't need to introduce further, what, honestly, I agree with you completely. It would have been cheap. It would have been easy to do that, because we've seen that 1,000 times. Oh, our marriage was tough. Oh, things were hard. You never pay attention to me. You never. Yeah, that's all marriages. Yep. Right? And these guys kind of get through that and find a way where maybe sometimes, half the time, people get to the other side of that ride and they're like, not for me. Yep. And it doesn't mean people cheated or did whatever. And I think that gave it more complexity. And it didn't have to rely on, something that, exactly like you said, would just be the obvious low-hanging fruit. And that really elevated this for me because I related throughout. I didn't get to the end and say, oh, this is totally us, except for that. This is just totally us. Yeah. And that's also what makes it funny. Because, and it also, in a way, I would say, I want Alyssa to watch it because I think it would empower our relationship because somebody wrote this movie and experienced these things. Right? Yeah. So when we're sitting here feeling like we're the only ones staring at each other's butts or we're the only ones pissed off that I'm hiding in the bathroom 4 times a day or we're the only, right? You're not. Someone else felt this, wrote a movie about it, and it is out there. And Paul Rudd and Leslie Mann found it in themselves to portray these characters because they probably have also lived this too.
Right.
And that's why we can laugh at it. And so in a way, it almost is like therapeutic. Right? Yeah. You'll get to the end of this and say, we're not alone, and it's funny and okay, and we're going to be okay. And that's honestly, it's weird to say. That's kind of how I felt at the end of it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. So, again, disassociate yourself from Knocked Up. If you haven't watched Knocked Up in a while or haven't seen it, don't.
Yeah, don't start with that.
Because you can really, and I don't want to say as long as you don't ask these questions, the more and more you and I talked about it over the last couple of days, I did start poking at questions that I had forgotten about, and things that I was like, oh, why didn't this happen? Or why didn't this happen? It doesn't need to happen. You don't need to worry about it. Just watch this for what it is. And I think you'll appreciate it. That said, I talking about relatable things, I think is a really interesting conversation that we're going to have in the context of Into the Heights. In the Heights.
Tim, can I just say, your transitions tonight are stellar. Stellar, my friend.
I just,
carry me there, buddy. Pick me up in your arms. Tell me it's all going to be okay. And carry me into this next segment.
Things are going to be interesting, I think. I don't know if they're going to be okay. I'm really glad that you and I are talking about this. You have some personal experience with this as a person of color and of Latino, Latinx, whatever you want to go with.
Puerto Rican,
Puerto Rican, heritage and experience. So this is really, it's something I think you've been looking forward to. You love Hamilton,
loved it.
So. I'm familiar with In the Heights as the thing that he did before Hamilton. That is my extent.
Right.
I know the name. I knew this movie was coming. I knew people loved it. This is where Lin Manuel Miranda got his jump. And Hamilton was like the big thing. So when this was coming, I knew I was going to watch it. My sister-in-law really likes it. That's my extent. And so I was ready to watch this when it came out, and I was really interested to see where you fall in place. I mean, your story is really not that similar at all to this situation, but as a person of this heritage and background, I feel like you could speak to it a little bit. So I was really interested to get your take on what this movie was going to be like for you.
So I was excited to finally be talking about something that I felt at least somewhat qualified to talk about, right? Because we do try to have a lot of conversations and shed light on things. And we are, we're touched by things like anybody else. Sure, we can't necessarily speak to the, but we can empathize, right? On some level, to the plight of various causes. And so, I think I was excited for this for a lot of reasons. I was introduced to Lin Manuel Miranda through Hamilton. Obviously, when that blew up in the universe, that was the first time I'd heard this other Puerto Rican's name. I was excited about Hamilton because as Puerto Ricans, we get excited to support, the island's native sons and daughters in anything that they do, right?
Yeah.
And so that was exciting to me. And through the course of, diving into Hamilton, I found out that wasn't why he was known. And in fact, he was known by the Broadway musical In the Heights. And immediately I was like, what is this? Right? It is like that it really focuses on, our culture in a way, and the struggles that we have. So I was so excited to learn more about In the Heights, and I immediately heard that it was being adapted to film. So I was like, great, that's my other love. I'll just wait and see. Like, I don't want to taint it by seeing the musical and being disappointed in the movie. I enjoy watching the adaptations of theater to film more often than not, and so I let that be the thing. When I saw In the Heights, which hit HBO Max and theaters same day last Friday, I watched it on Friday. I watched it that night. I told Alyssa, I need you to put the kids to bed. I'm going to watch this. You're welcome to join me, but that's where I'll be, and that's what I'll be doing. And I was all in. When it ended, I was very disappointed. And I didn't fully know why. And I started all night. I was thinking about it. The next day, I kind of marinated on it. And I said, you know, there ended up being a lot of reasons, right?
Yeah.
Some of them simply just filmmaking choices and things that I just struggled with following, just at a critic level, right?
Sure.
And so there was that. But I was being bothered by other things as a Puerto Rican watching this movie. And it was that I knew immediately stuff was lacking. And I think I called you and I said, look, I watched In the Heights. I didn't like it. And you had said, oh, I haven't seen it yet. We're watching it tonight. So I held off on saying anything. And I told you, I said, I need to, because I immediately went online and I was like, I don't like In the Heights. Like, and I don't read reviews. I try really hard not to. And because I don't want it to taint my opinion. But honestly, it was universally positive on that day, on Friday night, Saturday morning. Since that, and as the weekend has gone on, some of the world has kind of caught up to my way of thinking. Not that they've caught up to my way of thinking, but rather I have been, I think, validated in as the sort of tide has settled down.
Yeah.
People are chiming in with similar sentiment. And so I told you, I said, I need to watch it a second time because I need to make sure I didn't miss something.
Yep. And I mean, I think a lot of it too, what we spent that initial conversation was talking about that, your relationship to what you were expecting from it. But then also me and somewhat Carissa also in that conversation coming in at it from a theater perspective and a musical perspective. And
that's
saying,
why I called you.
Yeah.
I was like, what am I missing from a theater perspective?
Yes. You know, so because it's musicals are different. Musicals are I always think about classic musicals like The Music Man or Guys and Dolls or you know, those older ones, Kiss Me Kate, Bye Bye Birdie, things like that. There's a ton going on, and that was one of the things you said, like there's so much going on. And there is, to justify all that music, right? To give people songs. There's a lot of different storylines happening. There's multiple love interests. There's multiple conflicts. And things get messy and not everything is resolved, right? I mean, Into the Woods has 1,000 different characters. And, you know, there's so much that does get resolved, doesn't get resolved. And really, it's all frameworked around the music. You know, most of the time, you have to believe that they start with a song and they start with that, and then you work a musical around it, right? It's not every day you get a Green Day and American Idiot that was written as a concept rock album, and then you can write a musical around it. You know, you come down with a hit song, you know, an idea, and it flows from there. And so musicals don't always tie up all their loose ends. This movie's 2.5 hours as it is to fit all the songs in. You can't find time to cinch up all the storylines and all of the mess that happens without making it 4 hours or conversely cutting things, right? It's very similar to the book versus movie thing, you know, that conversation. This musical to movie adaptation is a very similar conversation about how do you edit? What do you cut? Can you cut? People want to see the songs. People want to see certain things. You, as the director, can't make the choice to cut Carnival and Barrio in favor of time because somebody's coming to see this movie for that song.
So here's my argument to that, and I agree. Let's start with the easy, which is let's look at it critically as a movie and the plot lines and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I would argue that that's not true. So I am a massive fan. The first stage play I ever saw was Phantom of the Opera, and I loved it. I was mesmerized. And when I found out there was a film adaptation with Emmy Rossum and Gerard Butler, despite Gerard Butler just howling his way through, Phantom of the Opera, I liked the film adaptation. Yeah. I enjoyed it immensely. There are probably people out there who are big fans of the stage play who hate the movie version. I would argue theater people are theater people to an extent, right? And the people who need to see In the Heights on stage did that and will continue to do that anytime it's on a stage.
Sure.
When you make the decision to adapt the stage performance to film for a movie, right, your audience, no matter what you think, is no longer theater goers. Your audience is movie goers. Yeah. Moviegoers expect a certain level of, or a certain way of storytelling that is just not native on the stage. And they're different mediums. For the same reasons why you name me a movie based on a book that someone who read the book first watched the movie and says, damn, that's spot on, right? Every single time. There are podcasts dedicated to this. Shout out to the Boovie Girls. They have a great podcast. If this is an argument you and your friends have, BOOVIE Girls, check them out. They watch movies and read the books and compare and contrast and decide which one was better. You tell me a time where unanimously people think the movie was better than the book. Maybe you can count that on one hand. Yeah. Most of the time people are saying, oh, the book is better. Oh, the book is better. Well, the book is the book. And if you want to read the book, go read the book. I don't read books. Me no read words, right? Me want flash pictures. And so when they turn that book into a movie, I will go watch the movie. I watched all the Harry Potter movies before I read the books. Why? Because the books, if you watch the movie first, you won't be disappointed. And if you love the movie, go back and read the book because it's only going to enhance that experience of those characters. If you read the books first and watch the movies, you're going to be disappointed because you got to cut them. You can't. A 700-page novel is a 700-minute movie. Yeah, that will never happen.
It really does beg the question in my mind that why? Why do we feel like we can adapt books, right? Why do you feel like you can cut that down? Why don't you feel like, because I don't think this is a problem. I don't think this is a unique problem to this musical, right? And I'm glad they didn't do it with Hamilton. Your options are to do a filmed version of the stage
the difference.
Play,
yes,
or do a theatrical cinematic version, right?
And that's the difference.
And you just, why? Why don't we do that? Why don't we cut a couple of storylines? Why don't we give a little bit more talk time, right? And I think, because I think you're right. I think if you want to go see the musical, go see the musical, right?
And that's the point, right? If you're going to adapt a play to a film, you need to make a movie. If you want to just allow people at home to see your play, then you do what Hamilton did, and you release Into the Woods has one. They all have one. You release the stage production on DVD, Blu-ray, on demand, whatever, and you let people watch the play at home.
And you can do it effectively. Now,
Hamilton did a great job.
Very, very well done. Yes.
Right. And I'm not saying that that's the same as the theater, but my point is, a lot of what bothered me about In the Heights cinematically, right, was that the story was too messy. There was way too much going on because we don't need all of that in the movie, right? You don't need to cram every song in. Sure, right? The whole idea is behind IP and things being optioned right? You got a New York Times best-selling book, or you've got a multiple Tony Award-winning theater production, and you want to bring that and you want to cash in on the film market, you're going to get greenlit because you have a built-in audience. That's the idea, right?
Yeah.
1,000 million bajillion people went and saw Hamilton and In the Heights, and so when we make a movie out of it, those people are going to come watch this movie. And that is true. And you're going to piss them off because it's not going to live up to the play.
Yep.
But the other side of that coin is people who went and saw that play, like me, I never saw the play, but I love movies. You want to bring that story, that successful story, and make it accessible to those of us who don't go to the theater. Now, you need to speak our language. And the language of film is different than the language of stage. And I think the big failing of this movie is that it isn't a movie. It's a play dressed up like a movie, and therefore it is a failure as a movie in my mind. There's too much going on. And in fact, the things that they do cut would have made the movie better. The love stories are boring. Right? It makes no sense why Usnavi and Vanessa aren't together, and we don't have the time to dive into the characters and their love stories. Why? Right? She is both. She is ignorant. In terms of Usnavi's affections for her, right? She is ignorant. She's clueless. She's playing hard to get, all at the same time at different points in time, with no explanations as to why.
And she's angry about him wanting to leave when she's trying to do the same thing.
And we never dive in deeper into the core of who these characters are because we have to watch the shiny song. And that is a failing of the movie. Nina and Benny are a secondary love story. We find out briefly in a song that they were together before and broke up. Now they're together again. We find out in another song they bone. Right. And it feels so jarring and disjointed that it makes no sense. Additionally, I remember watching it, and Benny is African American. He is the only leading character who is not Latino. And he is with Nina, who plays a Puerto Rican. In real life, she's Dominican. Jimmy Smits is her dad, and he runs the taxi cab stand or whatever. And Benny works for him. Again, in a song, there's this implication that Benny was always opening up the hydrants and being chased by the cops. And the way he met Nina was he went slamming into the door at her dad's office, and he let him in reluctantly, right? Like, he is African-American, not Latino. He's seemingly a troublemaker in the dad's eyes as a young age, right? And now Benny is with his daughter. Why are we not exploring a relationship between Benny and Nina's dad where he isn't happy about that relationship because he sees him as an outsider and he sees him as a troublemaker? There is no conflict in their relationship besides the conflict that they impose on themselves, which is also never explained. Now, I hear that in the stage play, that is a theme. That is a plot line. So why do you cut that, which would have actually made this a more interesting story? So my whole point is that it's messy, it's jumbled, just the plot lines get too twisted, and there's just not enough character development there to really sell me. Every time you sing a song, you're trying to sell me on Usnavi's desire to go back to the DR, but why? Because his dad had a bar there? He thinks that's the time of his life? But why isn't it, like, do you see what I'm saying? That is counter to what the traditional narrative is for people of my culture. The narrative is you go to America for a better life. Here you have, and I find this fascinating, here you have a Dominican who wants to go back to the DR. That's his dream. Let's explore that. Why? And you just don't. It's just sort of stated to you as fact. And then you listen to a Piragua song about the Piragüero getting kicked out of the streets by the
Mr.
soft
Softy.
serve. And it's like, who cares about the Piragua guy? We already understand that gentrification is happening. I don't need it expressed to me in song by the guy who wrote it. Right? Like, give me some more meat on the bones of the characters who are leading this. You're not Usnavi anymore, Lin Manuel Miranda. So take a back seat.
And
also, to show me George Washington? as Mr. Softy, like fine, who cares? So that bothers me, and so I think my overall kind of thought is it fails as a movie.
Yeah,
a great play, I'm sure, not a great movie. We'll get to some positives. We'll do that at the end. Let's tackle the big one.
Yeah, this is sort of blown up since we started talking about it.
Yeah,
and I will credit Carissa because she pointed it out as we were watching it, and I was kind of dismissive of it, thinking like, "Oh, Lin Manuel Miranda wouldn't let this happen." When I talk to Frank next, I want to get his opinion on this, and we were a little prescient on this, and it started bubbling to the surface. But Carissa points out that the leads, again, the three of them, which are Hispanic, one is black, but the three of them are very light-skinned Latinos.
Yes.
And I was like, but that's the way they probably are. I don't see him doing this. And I brought it up to you, and you agreed wholeheartedly. And I was like, are we still being a little sensitive? Are we overcompensating? We're not.
So I would say, to sort of validate where we were going, I think you guys came to me with your thought directly from a place of representation of color.
Yes.
And what was fascinating to me was how we were on the same wavelength, but kind of on different boats, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I saw it immediately. Not. What's funny is in my brain I see it as not color, but it absolutely is. I saw it as cultural misrepresentation. The lead in this movie is Dominican, right? There are multiple characters in the background that you see who are supposed to be Dominican, right? They dance around with the flag, whatever, right? There's a whole number that separates the groups. Mexicans, Dominicans, and it's all really Caribbeans and Mexicans, right? Mexicans, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, and whatever. Anyways,
Cubans.
Cubans, thank you. So, that being said, as a Puerto Rican, we know, right? Like Puerto Ricans on the island, we have all three kinds, right? My mother and my grandmother could totally pass for white. 100% pass for white. Full-blooded Puerto Rican women. 100% white. Me and my sister, sweet mocha brown. Like kissed by the Taino blood, right? And then you have the people of African, descent who are more influenced by that, who are much darker skinned. We have all three in Puerto Rico, right? The Dominican Republic, which shares its island with Haiti, was greatly influenced by the African slave trade and all kinds of things, and therefore are very much culturally Afro-Latino, regardless of how they look, right? Salsa music comes from the DR, right? Puerto Ricans dance to it like crazy. We love it. But Plenas en Bombas is the music of Puerto Rico. The Dominicans, salsa, merengue, these are the beats and the rhythms of African influence, right?
Yeah.
So for me, regardless of color, I did not see that cultural representation of Afro-Latino. And you would expect to see that with Dominicans. Now, that being said, and not to make a generalization, right? But Dominicans tend to be darker, right? Because of that influence, because of Haiti and the African slave trade and all this kind of stuff. A majority of maybe not a majority, but Dominicans tend to be darker skinned. And when I saw Usnavi, played by Anthony Ramos, who is Puerto Rican, right, and light-skinned, when I saw literally all the leads,
and in the original Broadway cast
was Lin Manuel Miranda,
right, also Puerto Rican
and light-skinned. So there is a gross misrepresentation, because Afro-Latino is a big part of not only visually our culture, right? And speaking in like the universal, I mean, you shouldn't generalize, but speaking in the Latino culture, not only is the African influence visually predominant in our skin color and in our tone, but also in our culture, our music, our dialect, our manner, like all of, like we share common blood.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was grossly missing. When I watched it, everybody in the movie, like all the main actors, looked the same.
Yeah.
They were all the same tone. They had the same mannerism. And in fact, even in the writing, and you can tell that it's written in the perspective of someone who really, I mean, we can't know all things, right? Lin Manuel wrote this movie trying to shed light the best that he could on a bigger picture. But he can only speak to his own journey. And that is, you cannot fault a man for that.
Sure.
But everyone kind of had the same struggle, right? Everyone's story was kind of the same. Everyone kind of looked the same. You know, and I say that because, you know, in terms of representation, you have Puerto Rican characters, right? The issue with being Puerto Rican in the United States is a fascinating one to me. And I'm sure, and I'm biased, but you have Puerto Ricans are born United States citizens. For anyone listening who does not know that Puerto Rico is a territory of the U.S. and we are born United States citizens, shame on you, right? But what's interesting is it doesn't matter that we come here as if it's the same as you driving from Jersey to Virginia or D.C. to Maryland, flying from Puerto Rico to the United States is the exact same thing.
Yep.
But when you're here, you're treated as less than, right? And you're kind of lumped in with everybody else. So you come to a place of which you belong, but yet you don't belong.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's fascinating. Additionally, for those of us like me who are born in the United States and practically raised here, I only lived in Puerto Rico for a short time.
Yeah.
But I myself am raised Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
And I identify as Puerto Rican. But being born here, it's almost like it disqualifies me to island-born Puerto Ricans.
I feel like we see that play out a lot in the African American experience in culture too, right? If you're light-skinned, a lot of the times at least the way it's been portrayed in different media and stories and things, and books and articles that I've read, said a lot of times light-skinned folks aren't accepted by either as well. You're either not black enough or you're
not
too
white enough,
you know, or not white enough. So, that's a really interesting kind of dynamic.
Well, and that's the case here, right? For me, I'm not Puerto Rican enough because I'm born and raised here, and I'm not American either because I'm Puerto Rican. So it's like you kind of operate in this limbo where you don't really belong. Now, that's not how I felt in my family, right? Your parents, everyone around you is like, eres puertorriqueño, you know, blah blah blah. But it's not how the other Puerto Ricans see you. So, you know, I think that's a missed opportunity with the character of Nina, where Jimmy Smits could have been Puerto Rican. Maybe there's other Puerto Ricans on the block. Of course there are. But maybe Nina's born in the United States. Right? Yeah. Why don't we see maybe some interaction where it's like, oh, you know, Nina talks about wanting to help all the dreamers. How come there's no conflict of like, but you don't understand. You're a citizen. You haven't had to fight our fight.
Right.
And maybe Nina's seen as an outsider in her own community. And then when she goes to school, she's ostracized and seen as a immigrant or a whatever and is not accepted by American culture.
Right.
And that would have been a fascinating exploration of the Puerto Rican experience.
Yeah, I think I pointed out to you at one point I felt like they were unclear of generationally where this story took place.
Yes.
Right? Like, are they first and second generation, or have they been here for a while? And it sort of changes for each character, and I think that makes it muddy. You know, I had asked you about the dinner scene, and I was like, I mean, these are all different people. They're Puerto Rican and Dominican, and yet grandma knows how to cook a dinner for everybody that satisfies everybody. And you're like, no, like
we don't all eat the same food.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's like, and you said like, she wouldn't know how to cook all of this food correctly for all of these people. Like, it's just,
we have similar food, right? But like, you know, the Mexicans have tamales. We don't have tamales. We don't eat a lot of corn.
Yeah.
It's just, anyways, yes, but that aside, I could appreciate the sense of community. I remember when we moved here, my grandmother was already here.
Yeah.
And she and, my grandfather, and so we moved here, we lived with them until my mom could get on her feet, and then we got our own place. We moved to Stafford, and I was one of 3 Hispanic kids.
Right.
And we all bunched together, though. My core group of friends growing up were all the Spanish kids that we could find. It was me, Rico, and Enrique. So me, Rico, and Ricky. And then our friend Chris Wasik, who was half Mexican but half Polish on his father's side. So he had Wasik and could totally pass. So he was our day walker. And then we had a white kid named Daniel. So, but we were a somewhat diverse group, but we did band together. My mom, when she got a job with the federal government, through the Job Corps program and things like that, a lot of Puerto Ricans came over to work at Department of Labor where my mom worked. And immediately we had a core group of friends, all Puerto Rican, right? Carlos, Fritz, Heidi, Claudia, all of my mom's friends were Puerto Ricans who had come to work here at the DOL. And so growing up, these were the people that I partied with and hung out with, to the point, on my 18th birthday, I was like, oh, what do you want to do? I didn't want to see any of my friends. I was like, I want to hang with your friends, because it felt like home to me, right? Yeah. And they're adopted family. So I can totally relate to that sense of community and all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's captured well here to an extent. That's something that works. I just feel like there's so many cultural misrepresentations and missed opportunities, and that certainly extends to the physical appearances of the leads. We need to get to a place where we're letting the stories be told by the people they actually look like.
And that's the part that's blown up in the last couple of days, is that people are recognizing that, and people are saying what Carissa said, which is, I don't necessarily that these characters are whitewashed to a degree. And to me, that's really disappointing from the person who made Hamilton and had to have executive producing control over this film. You went out of your way in Hamilton to make these characters, play these characters not by the ethnicities that they were. And then you turn around and have this movie not represent the people that they're supposed to be. It is
a fine line.
Yeah. And and Lin Manuel Miranda's released a statement about it.
A great statement.
Yeah. And it is just disappointing that we're still there. I mean, and I don't know how much change you can expect so quickly from things, but that one just seemed obvious.
So, and that's what I don't want to speak to anybody's way of thinking, and we can all, with hindsight, say, "Oh, I would have done it better." Yeah. I don't know what I would have done. Right? Sure. It's a thin line between casting the people visually who are right and casting the people who are best for the role. Yeah, I can't believe that there aren't people who actors who look closer to what we should be striving for, who could also perform admirably, right?
And that's the argument that we've seen in recent years about any of these old casting choices. I mean, Hollywood in the 50s was notorious for, their casting of Native Americans and not using actual Native Americans, or using people that are vaguely, Hispanic men that maybe look Native American, right? Some of the things where, they've used terrible prosthetics on Mickey Rooney, right, to make him look Asian, rather than finding, casting an Asian person. Even some of the voice casting, right? A black character is voiced by a white guy on, The Simpsons, right? With Apu.
I mean, right? Hank Azaria has come out and apologized for Apu.
Yep. Yeah. So
yes, there's a lot that can be said. I would agree with you, right? Again, with hindsight, as an outsider looking in, if I'm writing a play about a Dominican, I probably would have cast someone darker skinned, because that seems more accurate to me.
Yeah.
Or at least taken the opportunity to to make. I mean, even if you're not going to explore the outsider perspective through the character of Benny, well, do it through the character of Nina and make Benny Afro-Latino. Like, just change it up. Do something. Like, you don't have to stick to the script. Because obviously you didn't. You dropped the whole Nina's dad storyline, which would have made this better. All of that being said, it's got to be said, Lin Manuel did issue a statement, and it was really great. Check it out. He, are apologies needed? I don't know. But maybe just responsibility taken and saying, like, I could have done better. I will do better. And I think his intentions, we got to say, it was the same with Hamilton, right? People are like, well, you're not exploring, like, this isn't the truth behind this. Look, we're opening up the dialogue. We're opening up the conversation. I kind of saw it more as, like, missed opportunity to tell some really important stories.
Yep.
And I think this is, it's we learn and we go from here. And I think, if anything, maybe this will inspire the next Latin filmmaker to do it even better, to tell an engaging story, right? Maybe I'm going to write the Puerto Rican story of whatever, who knows? That being said, this movie is worth your time. I know we've just spent like a half an hour telling you all the reasons why this movie doesn't work. And it's not that they're not true. Doesn't make it not worth your time. Visually stunning. The music, excellent.
Yep.
Everything you would expect from a Lin Manuel production.
I've been listening to the soundtrack a lot today because the style of music, obviously, it just gets in you, right? Yes. That Afro beat, the Latin infusion. I mean, it just, you can't help but move. But then add in his lyrical content and the rap and the hip hop elements. It's just fun. It's like Hamilton, right? It's fun music to listen to.
So much storytelling and exposition in the lyrics.
Yes. I mean, just listening to the opening song In the Heights again a couple times today, you're like, I missed all of this exposition when I was watching it. And visually, I mean, I can pick out two moments off the bat that were stunning. There's a scene in that opening song where Usnavi's looking out the window and you're seeing the dancers dance in the reflection of the bodega. Like, you're looking in the window on him and you're seeing the dancers, and you see this whole street of dancers in a reflection. It was awesome. And then the scene at the pool where they're all dancing in the pool, and Sonny has a little solo in his rap, and there's guys doing contortion act behind him. Like, it's nuts. I mean, there's some really big numbers going on here, and it's a lot of fun to watch. And color wise, it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeously shot movie.
Absolutely. I think there's some really cool stuff that happens in here. Really, what proves that bringing a stage production to film is something we should be doing, as long as we're doing it the right way and addressing the correct audience, is that you can just do things on camera and in post that you can't do on stage. We can do a lot of great things on a stage. And you'll watch, I mean, again, when I saw Phantom and the stage suddenly became water and candles were floating and the Phantom is rowing Christine into his lair, and I was like, when did this place fill with water? Right? Like, gorgeous, right? Not to take away from stage, but you can do really cool things on film, and they brought and elevated this storytelling visually to a whole new level, to all new heights, one might say. One last thing I do want to say, and not to backtrack and go back to the negative, but in terms of representation, yes, we're talking about color. Yes, there's a lot of people talking about color, and we're talking about cultural representation as well. But I also want to make a point to point out one other thing: the representation of women, and I do think there is, there is representation in the background, the dancers. One thing, I mean, John Chu, I love you, but really, your answer to the question of representation is going to be, well, what about the dancers and the backgrounds? Like, we got big women, and we've got small women, and we've got black guys and white guys.
I have a black friend.
Right, and it's kind of like, well, that's not what we're talking about here, John. Right? Like, we need to be in the lead. Every of the leads, they're all rail thin.
Yep.
Vanessa's like 6-pack abs and, boobs constantly pouring out. And Nina is, just super thin and whatever. Like, not really the most accurate visual representation of not just Latin women, but women in general. Like, let's also diversify the body types that we're showing. And we could, there's no easy way to have this conversation without it sounding like, oh, we need some more tubby people. And that's not what I'm saying. There's different body types. Like, I think about like Gina Rodriguez. That's kind of in my mind how I picture beautiful women, right? Real women have curves. Let's get some real women in these roles.
Yep.
And so, again, I think another shortcoming. Like, that's just not what our women generally look like. And they are gorgeous. But anyways.
People will argue, that we're in a world that is going too far in, talking about things like this. But in this case, when it's supposed to be advocating for something that it's not doing, it's even more obvious, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think a theater audience is again predominantly white. There's been lots of discussions. It's how do we bring the younger audience in? How do we bring the the Black community? How do we bring the Hispanic community? How do we make this more accessible to people that aren't old and white and have pockets lined with cash, right? Because it's especially in DC, it's a status thing. People are renewing their subscriptions at some of these big theaters because that's what they've always done with their money, and they could care less what's being performed. It's about having a subscription to Shakespeare or the Kennedy Center, or I go to the opera. Like, but do you go to the opera or do you go? Oh, we go to the opera, right? You know what I mean?
I'll never forget. Alyssa and I went to go listen to a Spanish duo, like a music duo from Spain, at Kennedy Center. So we went there. They play the music kind of in the in the lobby.
Yeah.
Right, and you can kind of go outside the doors and you're out on the balcony. But then right there in the lobby, they'll set up some music on like a little makeshift stage, and you just go and listen. And it was free. And that night was also a production of Hamilton.
Yeah.
I remember walking out with Elissa, and she pointed it out to me first. And we're walking out at this line waiting to go in. And this play that is being celebrated as representation for people of color, for all this, every single person in the line was white.
Yep.
And like, here's this play that's supposed to be for me, and I can't get in.
Because tickets are $200 a person,
right? And it's just like so. Again, it's like that's not a knock on the show, but that's the audience there. So if you want to make this accessible, on HBO Max for $14.99 for the month, and I can watch this movie, well, now you're actually going to attract the people you really made this for.
Yep.
Right? The people like me, and when I'm turning it on, I'm still not seeing me.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing my story. And I'm not saying in the lead. The lead is a Dominican. His story is not my story. But you have a secondary lead who is Puerto Rican and has screen time. I'm not hearing my story. Right? Yep. I'm not seeing my color. I'm not seeing the people I'm used to seeing.
I know we're kind of dragging this out a little bit, but even then, when we do touch on things that people are more familiar with, the Dreamers, right? It's a throwaway. It's a throwaway plot line.
Yes.
I thought there would be more of that, and it's like mentioned late, and then we don't know the resolve of it again, right? Because we didn't edit this for a more theatrical run. We don't know the resolve of it.
We don't know the resolve of almost any story.
And in previous discussions, we realized that there was an easy way to handle that. There's all this memorabilia from this time in Usnavi's new shop, and they could have thrown some pictures on the wall, right? Some graduation photos for Sonny, some, I don't know, marriage pictures for the other couples, something like that.
Again, Sonny, Dominican in the movie, Puerto Rican in real life, and light skin. Sorry, I'm just at this point.
Let's kind of wrap it up in a bow here. This is a lot of fun. It's a great thing to do on a Saturday night. Put it through your stereo, watch it. It's great. The music is fun. It stays with you. You're going to download the soundtrack if you like Hamilton at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this passes over you, right? I'm acutely, I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm aware of this due to my relationships, with you, with other people. I have people in my life that are of different heritage, right? So I can kind of I can kind of interpret that, and having you to kind of bounce some of this stuff off of when I question it is really helpful. So if you watch this and you don't see it, then I'm not saying that's a problem, but that's sort of what whitewashing is designed to do, right? Like you're supposed to just kind of see it. But that's part of a bigger issue that this podcast is not about. So.
I agree. And I think, this one kind of hit me a little closer than I expected, and more so than I expected. I noticed it the night I saw it, and I just felt like it was lacking, and I couldn't shake that. So, at the end of the day, but again, not only for the cultural and the representation stuff, but also just for the shortfalls of it as a movie in general. And being a movie lover, I felt let down by it.
Yeah.
That being said, it didn't live up to my expectations, which were high. And that's always a bad situation for any movie, because when your expectations are high, the only place you can go is down. And unfortunately, this one dropped lower than I had expected.
Yeah.
That being said, at its lowest point, it's still generally an enjoyable movie. It is a fun show. It is great music. The representation is lacking, but at the same time, it's also great to see so many Latino actors come together to tell a story, right? Yeah. And let's, and it's so hard, and it's like we don't want to detract from the work that got put into this. Because they didn't do enough. This is not a knock on Anthony Ramos or anybody, right, who is involved in this movie. It is just simply, and we should celebrate their hard work, and because it's fun. It is fun, and it's gorgeous, and it's sumptuous, and it has the hints of everything you want it to be. I will just say that if you are like me, the hints just may fall a little bit short.
Yeah.
But don't let that keep you from watching it. Make your own opinion. Yep. And let's celebrate what was done, because we're not going to get more of them done right and done better if we're not showing love to the ones that are made. Because all that's going to happen is the studios are going to say, I gave you your shot to put all your brown people in a movie and no one went and saw it.
Yeah.
So go see it and make up your own opinions. You won't be sad that you saw it.
Right.
That's
I agree.
You won't be sad that you saw it.
Not at all. Not at all.
All right. This one went way longer than we thought, but we knew we had a lot to tackle here. Yeah. And we had to do it delicately.
Yep.
At least as best we could.
Yep.
Let's see. Let's wrap this up. As always, next week. We've been talking a long time about doing Arrival.
Yep.
Arrival was available on Amazon Prime, and in all the time we've done the talking, and then In the Heights dropped, and then we felt a really strong way about it. Arrival has left Amazon Prime. But it usually pops up somewhere, and I will say, not to give too much away, but I think it's still worth talking about. Let's just say that. It's worth talking about, and it's worth people watching it.
Yeah, it was sort of surprising how easy we let that slide till next week. I think that's how fiery we were about Into the Heights.
Yeah.
I keep saying Into the Heights, like Into the Unknown.
You say Into the Woods. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's In the Heights, yeah.
We were so picked up on In the Heights, but for the week prior to that, we were all about Arrival.
And I've forgotten about it. I need to watch it again.
Yeah, so it's definitely something we need to talk about, because I'm really stoked about that movie for something I hadn't seen before. And it's prescient. It's happening.
So true. Yeah, so let's Let's do that, man. I feel bad because we waited so long on Tombstone. People had to like pay to rent it. So if you want to watch Arrival, you're probably going to have to pay to rent it or buy it. I don't think you'll be disappointed if you have to do that. So let's just do it again. I know we try to keep it to streaming, but we're going to throw one out there for you guys and discuss Arrival, starring Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner. Forrest Whitaker's in it. So if you haven't seen it and you want to see it before next week's episode, go check it out. Otherwise, we will see you next week to discuss it here on this show. And we promise not to get real heavy. That's not true. We'll probably get heavy, but not like this. And in the meantime, check us out on Instagram at Pause Reviews. You can shoot us emails, pausereviews@gmail.com. Obviously, go to the website, pausereviews.com. All the episodes are there, hosted by Podbean. Also, links to everywhere that you can get the show, everything from Apple Podcasts to YouTube to anything in between. Shoot us DMs, anything you guys want us to talk about. Let us know your thoughts on this episode or any of the others, and we'll be happy to share your comments and discuss them on the next episodes. All that good stuff, man. We're always looking for recommendations. We're always looking to hear from you. So share your thoughts with us at all those places.
Yeah.
We're everywhere. Except Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok. Ooh, maybe we should do a TikTok.
Vine.
I want to see Tim do all. Vine's not a thing anymore, Tim. I don't think it is. I was about to be like, now you showed your age. Maybe I showed mine. I think it's gone, and it's like this super underground thing that only the kids know about.
OnlyFans.
That's what we need, Tim. We need a Pause Reviews OnlyFans account. That's what the people want to see.
You can watch me record without a shirt.
Yeah, and you can watch me just be fat. Talk about representation. I love all my curves. I'm doing a little wiggle right now.
I love it.
All right, man. So, yeah, that is true. You are shirtless. And you know what's fair? I'm pantsless. So, together, we're full nude.
Yep.
Oh, you see the glass half full. I see the glass fully naked. So, as always, thank you for joining us. We will catch you next week. I'm your boy Frank.
This is Tim.
All right, we'll see you when we see you. So long.
Peace.